The third pick in this year's draft goes to the Philadelphia 76ers.
Starting out a little late this week. Hello, everybody, and welcome into the Sports on Broadcast episode 42, brought to you by SE Radio and Sporting Edge. I'm joined this week by Elijah. Elijah, how's it going this week?
It's going pretty good. Fighting through a little bit of a sore throat right now, but I think we'll make it through.
I hear you. Everybody's sick. That's why we missed the show last week because I was out. And Joe's out this week, so I appreciate you filling in.
Absolutely.
All right, before we get into the show, let's tell everybody how you can get in touch with us. You can comment on our live feed via Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, Twitter, your favorite app. Doesn't matter. Just comment. You can also tweet the show at Sporting Edge 1, and we'll go through those as the show goes on. And you can also call or text 267-404-MYSE, and we will dial you up and get your opinion on the show. There's a lot that happened this week. We'll start off with the processing Philadelphia 76ers. The NBA draft lottery was last night. The Sixers wind up with the third pick. What should they do with it?
If you're asking me, I think they have to take Josh Jackson. He's the best two-way player in the draft right now. And while it's possible that Fultz slips 2-3, I just don't think it's going to happen.
Do you think they should try and move up at all? I mean, Danny Ainge is one of those guys who really likes to wheel and deal. I think the Sixers could package one of those two future picks that they have, the Lakers or the Sacramento Kings, and maybe move up if Fultz is the guy they want.
Right. I mean, honestly, the only way I think they should move up, if they do at all, is if it gets rid of Jahlil Okafor. And I know that might not be a super popular opinion, but he could thrive in Boston. It might be a good situation for him. It gives the Sixers, a little bit less of a logjam at the center position. They're going to have a legitimate starter in Joel Embiid, hopefully, when the season starts. And then after that, they could have Tiago Splitter coming off the bench, which is what he did in San Antonio when Brett Brown was there, I believe. Ultimately, if it gets rid of Jahlil Okafor, yes, they should trade up to number one.
Let's entertain the idea of jumping into Lonzo Ball falling to number 3. Would you do it?
No, absolutely not.
Why not?
Well, to me, more or less, I feel like him and his father are a little bit too much. If it was just Lonzo, I might not have a problem with it at all. But since good old LeVar might be coming with him, or, will be coming with him, I don't think that's any sort of issue that the Sixers want to deal with, especially as a rebuilding team.
His dad would absolutely hate if he went to the East Coast.
Oh, absolutely. He'd be furious. But you know what? I think ultimately, too, I don't think this is a good spot for Lonzo, at least fit-wise. I think he does have some work to be done, but then all of a sudden if he comes to the Sixers, who has the ball in their hands? Is it Ben Simmons or is it Lonzo Ball?
Well, I heard Brian Colangelo today making his rounds on the radio and with the press. It sounds like Ben Simmons for sure is going to be the guy at the number 1 handling the ball coming down the court. So you're right. I mean, with Lonzo Ball, I don't know where you would necessarily put him because he's just like Ben Simmons in the fact that he needs the ball to create.
Right, exactly. And, he needs the ball in his hands, and part of his game is making other players better. But if he's not running the show every play, how effective can he be?
My biggest fear, however, is you put Ben Simmons at the point and you find out he's a better 3, and the Sixers draft someone like Josh Jackson who's perfect for the 3, and then you have another logjam at another position that you don't necessarily need.
That's true.
It's definitely going to be tough. I'm excited to see what they're going to do. But let's entertain the fact of moving up. They have a ton of assets that they've accumulated, thanks Sam Hinkie. They have 2 future picks. They'll have their own pick in the next 2 seasons.
Yep.
They're only 2 spots away from number 1, and Boston is one of those teams. I mean, they're in the Eastern Conference right now. Could they look to try and add a player, not necessarily Markelle Fultz, who's in chalk, like in theory, the number 1 player? Um, but Boston could look to go with a forward. However, if they're how do I explain it? If they're basically if they're bluffing on Markel Fultz, do you think they could get the Sixers to entertain a deal?
I think it's possible, yes. And the reason I say that is because uh, I think Danny Ainge just has that way about him. He is a wheeler and dealer, and he has a history of being able to make deals that historically work out for the Celtics. Um, if they really say we're going to pull the trigger on Fultz, I don't think that's a good idea. They still have Isaiah Thomas. He's only 28 and really just approaching the prime of his career, it seems like. So, I really think it could happen, but if the Sixers are smart, don't do it.
All right, so it seems like everybody's playing basketball GM, and they're thinking of different ways that could be possible to bring in that point guard, or at least the shooter, because Ben Simmons is going to be that point guard. Now
Right.
let's look at Kyle Lowry. Philly born, went to Villanova, opts out of his contract with the Raptors. He's 31 years old. Is that something you would entertain, or is he too far gone? I know we just talked about Isaiah Thomas and how, for some reason, everyone thinks 28 is old in the NBA now, but somehow Kyle Lowry people want.
Right. And I think a little bit of it is size. Kyle Lowry is more like a stocky point guard than Isaiah Thomas is, who is only 5'9" and lean. So I mean, he doesn't really get knocked around as much. So maybe the thought is he doesn't have as much wear and tear on his body, but he seems to get hurt once a year anyway. I like Kyle Lowry as a player, but honestly, what it seems like to me is that he opted out of the contract just to possibly either A, re-up with Toronto because it's noted that he likes it there, or if he wants to try something new again, going somewhere like West.
They say
I
he
couldn't
wants to
tell you
go to
where,
a
but
contender. One team I could really see him going to, the San Antonio Spurs. They just lost Tony Parker. They're right there on the cusp still. Maybe he could work with LaMarcus Aldridge, Kawhi Leonard, and they could potentially have their own big three.
I think that's true, and it's very possible that that's an option. San Antonio, I believe, does have money coming up in this upcoming season. Um, but that being said, I don't know if he could outseat Tony Parker, and I don't know if Tony Parker's ready to come off the bench. So that being said, how willing would Kyle Lowry be to maybe not starting every game? That's what I'm wondering.
Yep. No, I hear you with that. All right, let's kind of come full circle and jump back to the actual lottery itself. What did you make of the lottery? Do you think it's rigged? How do you embrace Joel Embiid? Just everything he does is hilarious and fun, and he's very charismatic.
Right. So I'll start off with, is the draft rigged? And a couple days ago, I would have said no, probably not. And then all of a sudden, just like Magic Johnson predicted, they end up keeping their pick. So I think it's
But wasn't that
possible.
how it's supposed to go?
A little
Like they
bit,
had
but
the odds
I
to
don't think
land a top 3 pick.
true. But that being said, I think it is a little fishy how he guaranteed his coach and the players that they would keep their pick, and that's a little, that wording there is a little iffy to me. As for Joel Embiid, I love him like with all my heart. Like he is so funny, he's so amazing. You just hear him talking about why Rihanna should date him last night, and you
He's like,
find
I'm
yourself,
funny, I'm smart,
yeah,
I
yeah,
have a
right.
Cameroon accent. Like all this, like, oh
I
yeah,
mean,
that's why.
yeah, absolutely. And you know what? They said it on ESPN the best. She might need to trust the
Like all of a
process sooner
sudden.
than later.
I hear you on that. The one thing that was kind of odd to me is, you know how like before the ping pong balls were picked, they're talking about or they interview certain players. So they interviewed Joel Embiid and he said, hopefully we can get hopefully we can get 2 picks or move into the top. I forget exactly or land the number 1 pick. I forget exactly what he said, but as soon as he said that, Magic Johnson was like, "Yeah, that's not going to happen." Almost like they knew what the results were, and I'm sure
Well,
I'm sure they do, but they just can't. They steal their phones and stuff. But like at that point, I feel like he was kind of playing into it, but knowing. But then once you see the reaction of them getting the three, I don't
yeah,
know. It just changes the whole thing, and it definitely makes you
right.
think the way they go about this. I mean, L.A. the second pick 3 years in a row when they're bad, a top
You
market in the NBA.
you gotta wonder, and you know what? This is one of the more legitimate, I think, sports conspiracies that is out there currently.
Certainly. Let's jump into some new headlines with another team, the Philadelphia Eagles. They had a lot of rumors swirling around them this week. It started with Brandon Graham and the rumors that he wanted to re up on a contract. However, he denied those allegations. He was not at the voluntary practices, was visiting the family back in Michigan. But then it
hmm
turns out he comes back, he's full bore, ready to go, never had an issue with his contract. Do you think the media was trying to pull a story in what was kind of a down week, or do you think there were legs behind it? What are your thoughts on
Um,
that?
I really do think that the way sports media seems to be constructed, especially nowadays with all the social media and everything like that, is that you can kind of grasp for something that might have a little bit of fact behind it, but ultimately there's nothing truthful there. So while the media may reach in and distort facts here and there, and then formulate a story around that, that's kind of what I think happened ultimately. They might have heard a rumbling where someone might have said, "Oh, Brandon Graham wants, a few more years, and he really wants to stay in Philadelphia." And then all of a sudden, that turned into he's unhappy with his contract. He wants to re-up. He's going to skip workouts for this. And, and truthfully, he said it himself. It's fake news. Like it really didn't have. I think it was blown way out of proportion, truthfully. And I think Brandon Graham is happy to be here, and his production shows it. And I think he shows it by showing up again and saying, no, there's no issue. I think he, coming out and saying that really convinced me that there's no issue between him and the team in the slightest.
The reason I thought the story was believable is because of the way his contract was structured. Now, if you go back a few years, nobody was really willing to sign him. The Giants took a look at him, but he ended up signing back with the Eagles. However, he only got $4 million guaranteed out of a $26.5 million contract.
Right.
The reason I thought there was something behind it is because I thought he wanted more guaranteed money when Vinny Curry, who saw like 20% of the snaps last year, got a bigger contract than him.
Yeah.
And not to cause confusion in the locker room of who's the better player or anything like that. I think he just looked back at the last 2 seasons and said, "Hey, I've been really close to get to racking up double-digit sacks. I know he only landed 5.5 last year, and no, that's not good enough. But he was one of those players who put constant pressure on the quarterback, and then he looks to the guy next to him in the locker room who's only playing as a rotational player, making twice the guaranteed money that he did. So that's why I
Right.
thought it was believable. On the other hand, there was part of me that said, I don't know if Brandon Graham is one of those players to kind of like lash out. He's one of those guys who's really good with the media.
Yeah.
He's one of those guys who can be found on Twitter and social media, and willing to come forth when the team is not playing up to its standards. So that part of me said, I don't know, maybe there's something there. But on the other hand, Brandon Graham as a player he seems like one of those guys that's just always jolly and ready to go out and do work.
Right, exactly. And I think that really is kind of what he's about. And, while you are right, Vinny Curry is a rotational player, and it seems like that's what he'll be at best. I don't think Brendan Graham's one to lash out and say, hey, give me a new contract, otherwise I'm not playing.
I think he's also a smart player in the fact he knows that they're up against the cap this year. So he's
Yeah,
going to go out, play his ass off, and try and earn that new contract. If he comes up with 9.5 sacks this year, everyone's going to look at him and say, hey, you got to pay this guy.
right.
But right now, I think he just realizes what the situation is.
Yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things about him is, if he plays really well again this year, like he did last year, he was rated one of the best defensive ends in the NFL last year. But if he plays well, he's going to earn those incentives, and guess what? That's more money in his pocket. And I think he wants to go out and not only earn himself a new contract, but earn himself the incentives that are currently pushing him forward.
Absolutely. Let's look at the other headline coming from the Eagles today. Thanks for giving the Sixers, like all but 10 hours to bask in their glory of being the headline for for
Right.
Philadelphia media, and then they drop this bomb on them. The bomb would be LeGarrette Blunt signs a 1 year 20 or 2.8 not 20 $2.8 million deal. That would be record breaking. A 1 year $2.8 million deal. He is going to be the feature back for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, and I really, actually, really, really like this move. It gives them a little bit of a four-way thunder and lightning combo where it's Blunt and Smallwood who are capable of running the ball up the middle and having explosive plays running up the middle. And then on the counter side, you got Sproles and Pumphrey. So I think this is a great move, especially now. I think they have a red zone threat too. So not only do they have this like thunder and lightning combo where they can throw you a fastball and throw you a changeup, but then all of a sudden, you got a 250-pound man behind what's turned into kind of like a mauler line.
Hmm.
Bigger, you know, stronger guys over the quicker guys that Chip Kelly valued on the offensive line. So, behind all those big boys, you got a big man running, and I think he's going to score a ton of touchdowns for the Eagles this year.
Blunt comes off a career year playing in all 16 games, 299 carries, 1,100 yards, averaged just under 4 yards per carry, which is kind of like the benchmark each running back tries to hit. However, 18 touchdowns. Now you look at the team that he was on. Yeah, it was New England, but that's the fact. Like, this is the two takeaways I have from signing LeGarrette Blunt today. Number one, Ryan Matthews will no longer be on the roster as soon as he's healthy. It's guaranteed that he's cut. They're not going
Yeah.
to carry five running backs into training camp. He's going to be out of here. Number two, I think the signing of LeGarrette Blunt in itself makes the Eagles one game better on the schedule for the fact that he's going to be able to pick up those third down conversions during
Yep.
like throughout the season. He's going to be able to punch it in from the red zone, and late in a game, you hand it to him 4 or 5 times in a row, and you wind down the clock, and there's your solution. Where the Eagles didn't have that last year. So those are
Yeah.
just kind of my thoughts on Blunt. I think, if he can get over 1,000 yards again and get 12 touchdowns, it's going to be great. The only problem is, I think he's going to have to take a cutback on the touches for the fact that you have to get Sproles in there. You're going to have to give Wendell Smallwood a chance. You're going to have to figure out if Donnell Pumphrey is going to be the replacement for Darren Sproles, so he's going to need touches as well.
Right. And I do want to say back to your like third down comment. Last year, the Eagles didn't really have anyone that could convert on like 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 2. And now this gives their offense, a whole nother dimension in it because now they're not passing on every third down of the game.
Yeah, absolutely. One more thing I wanted to point out with LeGarrette Blunt before we move on to the Philadelphia Phillies, and we also have a special guest calling in shortly. LeGarrette Blunt, I got a stat for you. So, Blunt is the first running back to lead the league in rushing touchdowns and then leave his team the following season. Can you guess who the other person is?
Oh,
How about
no idea.
DeMarco Murray in 2014? How'd that work out for the Eagles?
Oh, damn.
Yeah, so just keep that in mind. Hopefully he can keep the production up, but we've seen it before. However, I think DeMarco Murray was more of a scheme fit. I mean, he bounced back
Yeah,
last year. You see that Chip Kelly just didn't use him correctly.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a quality running back situation, and DeMarco was not used to running from the shotgun, and tried to force him to do that, and it didn't work out.
All right, guys, we're going to take a break before we jump into the Phillies. On the other side, we're going to have Joe, who's missing the show today, call in. I think he's playing some hooky, in my opinion, because it's 90 degrees out. But we will see you guys shortly, and we'll be back in a minute.
Support our podcast by using mysportingedge.com/Amazon to make your next online purchase.
You're listening to SE Radio, brought to you by Sporting Edge, online at mysportingedge.com. Sporting Edge. Follow us on Twitter at Sporting Edge 1 and like us on Facebook by searching Sporting Edge.
Hey guys, welcome back into episode 42 of the Sports On Broadcast, brought to you by Sporting Edge and SE Radio. We are now going to go to the man, the one and only Joe Fabiani, my host. How you doing? Did you get some Robitussin?
Nah, no Robitussin, man. Just hanging in there. Tea and relaxation.
I hear you. So let's get your thoughts on what we've talked about so far, the NBA draft lottery, what you would do. Do you think they should trade up? Yada, yada, yada.
Well, it's interesting. I really don't think that there's a bona fide number one in this draft. I think that there's a lot of talk about Fultz being the number one pick or maybe Ball. But I don't really think that there's a set in stone pick, and I think that the Celtics are definitely going to shop that pick around. I heard today with Brian Colangelo that even the Sixers had received an offer for the third pick. I wouldn't say that, there's definitely, it's going to go Fultz, Ball, and then we kind of fall into, the best available player at that point. But, I think they lucked out in having that swap, and Sam Hinkie really saved the day and deserved that banner that they raised up for him yesterday.
What about Kyle Lowry? Do you think they should look into free agency?
It's an interesting thought. I kind of feel like you have to see. I really don't know, if they need a point guard or if he can play the two. I'm not really sure. Everything you hear out of the Sixers camp is that they want Simmons to be the point guard. I'm not really sure if they can get a true point guard. How that would affect Ben Simmons' progression. It'll be interesting to see how they figure it out. I think they definitely need a shooter. If they're not able to get that at the number 3 pick, I think that they have to go out and sign a veteran guard, maybe a guy like J.J. Redick or a guy in Patty Mills. There's definitely some guys available, or maybe make a trade for a veteran shooter. They definitely need to go out there and get a shooter.
One thing that's been in the news, and Elijah and I were talking about J.J. Redick just a little bit ago before we went on air. Is J.J. Redick too old, and what's going on with all these GMs thinking that a 28-year-old Isaiah Thomas not GMs, spokespeople for the NBA are saying that if Boston drafts Markelle Fultz, he's kind of the heir apparent to Isaiah Thomas, who's only 28 in his own right.
Right. If they draft a guard, they're going to be very. They're going to have a lot of guards on that team. I think it'd be interesting. They're not going to play 3 guards. At least I wouldn't think they would. I don't really remember an NBA team playing that way. I think of three guards playing in the starting lineup. I think of Villanova, to be honest with you. So,
Great comparison.
I'm not really too sure that that's something that they would do. Yeah, I would say that 28 is definitely not old, especially for a guy who's really just come into his own. I think that most guys really play, at their highest level, I would say, until they're about 31, 32. So I wouldn't say that, he's at that point where he's going to start downward spiraling after, he had his breakout year this year. But it'll be interesting. I don't really think that, Fultz is a great fit there. I just think that he's maybe the best player available, and maybe that's why they would take him. But we'll see. I don't know if you're Boston how you could do that. I mean, I know people are going to say that it's going to be a good problem to have, but they said that the Sixers said that about having all those centers, and we saw how that worked out.
Joe, working with you for about 2 years now, I love to put you on the spot. So here we go. You're sitting in as Brian Colangelo. Would you be making a call to Boston and try and move up for the number 1 pick?
I would think that you have to at least do your job and see what it would take to get up to 1. If they really value Fultz that high, and they don't think they'd be able to get a guy, at that caliber of player or that talent in the next 2 years with those other picks that they'll have, then you definitely have to do your due diligence and go out there and see what you can get. I would think that if you could do it for maybe next year's draft pick and the Lakers pick and maybe a player, I would think you would do that. But I would think that Boston's going to kind of hold that pick at ransom and really try to get a boatload of picks or maybe even a superstar, maybe make a trade for a guy like Jimmy Butler. But if it was me, I would definitely inquire about it, but I don't think I'm pulling the trigger on that point, because I don't know if it'll be worth it to really, I know people want the process to be over and they really want the Sixers to make that jump. But we still have to see all these guys on the court and healthy at the same time. So, I don't think I'm ready to make that move at this point, but I think you definitely have to inquire about it.
No, it's definitely a great point. We're done with trusting in the process. We need to see the process bear the fruit of its labor and give back to the Philadelphia fans who have suffered for 4 straight years.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's definitely been tough, and not just for basketball, but all the sports all of the Philadelphia teams have been rebuilding, and the Sixers really seem to be the talk of the town at this point, because they've really accumulated big name assets. So it's definitely something that people are ready to see how these guys pan out, but I think that staying at 3 and holding on to your assets in the Lakers pick and your Kings unprotected pick, that would be a better play just in case one of these other guys doesn't pan out.
Joe, let's transition over to the Eagles. We were talking about Brandon Graham a little earlier and the rumors surrounding him. Let's get quick thoughts on that, and then we'll jump into LeGarrette Blount.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting conversation. I think that when you look at Vinny Curry's contract, and if you're Brandon Graham and you see how much money Vinny Curry's making and how you're outperforming him, I can understand your frustration, but I think at this point, with how much depth they have on that defensive line, if I'm Brandon Graham, I go back out there and I bust my butt to really have that conversation next off season, and getting big money. Just because there's so much depth on that line now that I think that, to sit out at this point, it really could get him behind the 8 ball. And a guy like that, I think after the season he had, I think he's the type of person that really needs to come to work and show that leadership and really help these guys. And I just think Brandon Graham's a team player. I don't really think he's the guy who's gonna hold out like that. But I would think that if he performs at the same level or even finishes with higher sack totals, I think that we'd be having a different conversation. I think that if he would have gotten double-digit sacks, that then you really could have made the case for him getting that contract. But at this point, I think that he did the right thing in showing up. And like I said, I think that if he performs at a high level again, this season, that he could come into more money next offseason.
Yeah, that's something Elijah and I were basically echoing the same sentiment. The fact that he is a team player, he's one of those guys who just wants to come in and work. He could have looked at Vinny Curry just, and saying like, well, why did he get so much money if he's only playing 25% of the snaps? But I think he's more one of those players that's just going to put up, shut up, and show up, and try and earn that contract because he knows the situation with the Eagles.
Right, and I understand the business point of, well, this was your best season, and maybe that's the type, that's a time where you try to go out and get more money. But I think that where he's at in his career, I mean, he is getting older, but I think that waiting another year and performing at a high level again would really get him more money next off season.
Joe, let's get you out with your thoughts on LeGarrette Blount and the 1-year, $2.8 million signing the Eagles made this morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a good depth signing. I think that was the type of back that they were missing. They really needed a guy who was going to be able to take over in the fourth quarter and kind of run the clock down and really help the Eagles with ball control towards the end of the game if they have a lead and they're trying to wind the clock down and get out of there with a win. He's coming off of a season where he had 18 touchdowns. I mean, he's an absolute beast in the goal line and short yardage. And he's shown that he's able to carry a load if you need to rely on him for a game or two. And realistically, he doesn't have a lot of mileage on him. He only has 2 seasons out of his 7 with over 200 carries. So, I mean, he doesn't really have a lot of mileage on him. I know he's 30 years old, but when you look at the backfield at this point, you kind of have a guy in Wendell Smallwood who you're trying to groom. You got to see what he gives you, and then you have the 2 versatile backs in Sproles and Pumphrey. And, I think that Blount would really complete this committee and really complete the offense at this point and make it absolutely terrifying for other defenses in the division and in the NFC.
Well put. Certainly great stuff from you, as always. Looking forward to getting you back next week. Make sure you hit up that combo of Dayquil, NyQuil, and we'll see you next week.
All right, boys. Take care.
All right.
See ya.
Good stuff from Joe right there. Elijah, your just initial reaction on some of his thoughts?
I agreed with pretty much most of them, especially the ones where, the Sixers shouldn't move up. But I agree with him that Smallwood is going to have to be groomed, and it looks like they're going to do that with him. But yeah, pretty much, I think me and him are going to be on the same page for quite some time with this.
Yeah, I hear you. It's kind of funny because the way, like, Eagles fans used to be mad all the time, or just Philadelphia fans in general, really. But now that we've seen this transition of every single team retooling, there's definitely a more patient approach to every fan in the city, and we're just waiting for it to blossom into something.
Right, and, I'm going to harken back to what I was watching on TV this morning. It was Colin Cowherd, I believe. He said that the Sixers are one of the most interesting bad teams in the NBA. Like, they're not
Without
good,
a doubt.
but they're about to be, so you find yourself watching those games being like, oh, maybe this is the one where, so-and-so breaks out. But I could argue that that's every team in Philadelphia. The Eagles had their down year under Chip Kelly. The Phillies have been pretty bad for quite some time.
We'll get to them in a second.
Yeah, we're going to get to them. The Flyers have had their struggles, and the Sixers, they've been the worst of all of them. They've been one of the worst teams in the NBA for 4 straight years now, which is, pretty ridiculous. And granted, the Phillies have had, 3 bad years now? But you can see the come up with all of these teams, and it's super exciting to watch just as a fan.
Well, let's think about that and look at the Eagles specifically. 7-9 last year, yet they still get 5 primetime games in this upcoming season. However, even on top of that, they had Carson Wentz last year, so they were intriguing. Now they add 3 players in Torrey Smith, Alshon Jeffrey, and LeGarrette Blount for him to work with. Granted, they're 1-year deals, but they're still interesting as a team, and yet everyone thinks that they're just going to go 8-8 this season, but yet they're on prime time. They're playing primetime games left and right.
Right, and I think that part of that, at least, is a product of, especially Carson Wentz saying, hey, guess what, guys? Like, I'm here. We're about to make noise. And so I think they're going to, at least the major networks, the ESPNs, the NBCs, they really want to get these teams in the door early now, it seems like. Last season, the NFL ratings fell.
Yeah, good point.
So what do? This might be a 2-year project to build the Eagles to a national powerhouse level in terms of when they're on TV, people watch.
Yeah, hopefully
So
hopefully the front office can build them into that powerhouse.
right, exactly. Instead of going, 7-9 last year, 8-8 this year, and then maybe 10-6 next year.
We'll certainly see where it takes us. Let's jump into our final segment of the show. We have the Phillies on top, who a lot of people are probably going to tune out right now. They definitely are struggling. They're like 13-21 after starting pretty well. However,
Yeah.
there are some really good storylines with this team, believe it or not. Let's start with Pete Mackanin getting an extension through 2018 and an option for 2019. I know between Joe and I said that Pete Mackanin just seems like a lame duck out there. However, I actually kind of like part of his managing style. There's certain things I don't like about it, but let's just get your initial reaction on Pete Mackanin as a manager himself. Is he a lame duck?
So I'd like to hear your full lame duck thought, but before that happens, no, he's not a lame duck because the Phillies have shown notable improvement each and every year, and whether that's just talent being called up or whether that's Pete Mackanin doing work at the major league level, they've gotten better. And I think they see that. It wasn't like under Ryan Sandberg where they got, progressively worse, and that was with an aging team. So they blew it up. They have these really young, really good players now that are coming up, and all of a sudden, I'm sorry, not Ryan Sandberg, but Mackanin has all these pieces that he can put in. He had Michael Franco batting sixth the other day, and he would be a four-hitter on almost any team in the majors, aside from the ones with like Giancarlo Stanton or Miguel Cabrera or
Miggy,
anything
yeah.
like that.
Yep.
So, I mean, there's so much versatility and so much potential with what Pete Mackanin can do. I love that they signed him for possibly another 2 years.
So my lame duck theory started when Ryan Sandberg was cut and Pete Mackanin was kind of thrown in there as an interim coach. As the interim manager. He's been around baseball for his entire life. We heard that with Charlie Manuel as well. But we know that Pete Mackanin isn't Charlie Manuel. So my lame duck theory kind of started when he just took over as the interim. However, I think he's done some really good things. And you talk about the youth movement coming up. I think he's learning what the strengths are as they go along. And they've been awful the last 10 games. But
Yeah.
to be honest, I think he's doing a great job with it. He's mixing around. He's trying to figure it out, and that's something he seems like a player's coach, and it's not like moving Michael Franco to the sixth spot. He's like, oh, why am I doing this? Blah blah blah. Like everyone kind of goes along with what Pete puts out there. So my opinion has changed on him. However, there are a few things that kind of get my ears up, I guess you could say. I think he has issues sticking with his starter when they're struggling. It seems like for at least 2 weeks now, no one has gone deeper than 5 innings as a pitcher, and that's really strung
Right.
out his bullpen. So some of the managerial aspects of the game I question, but however, I think he's a really good players coach, and I think he can get the job done. I don't mind the extension. It's just the lame duck theory kind of started when he took over as interim, and I feel like he's still on an interim basis.
Right. I think, the one thing about that is, especially with this team right now, the bullpen's so bad and the Phillies don't have the starters that the Washington Nationals have, so we can't really hide it as well as they can.
Mm-hmm.
We can't have a starter, 4 out of 5 times go out there and throw 8 innings possibly, or throw a complete game shutout. That's just not, Hellickson won't do that. Eichhoff won't do that. Nola probably won't. Maybe we'll see when he gets back, but I think he's more of like a 6-7 inning guy. The only guy I could really think of is if he keeps his pitch count down is Vince Velasquez, and that hasn't
And
happened.
he can't do
recently.
that.
Yeah. So I mean, really, the Phillies don't have anyone that can hide their bullpen, and we were hoping, at the very beginning of the season, oh well, maybe Genmar Gomez really could be, a productive closer. But if you look at the second half of his season, I believe he had like an 11 ERA through the second half of the year, which is, just horrendous. And I think it really came back and, bit the Phillies early in this year. And, they've moved to Hector Neris now, which I like. But if you think about it, we really haven't had, like, a guy you could point at and be like, this guy's the closer since, I guess Ken Giles, but even really before that, Jonathan Papelbon.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, early in the season, it seemed like they were getting quality starts, is what I'm saying. So now the Phillies, like, they aren't getting the quality starters that they want. And I'm looking for a tweet that I put out. Last time the Phillies starting pitcher went 7 innings or more was Vince Velasquez on the 6th of May. Only 9 times has a starter gone at least 7 innings in the first 35 games. That's what I'm talking about. Like, I feel like even if they're not going to go 7 innings, let them pitch the 6 because you're killing your bullpen. And that's the thing. Like, Joaquin Benoit, the worst timing, came out, but he was right in the fact that he said no one has a role in the bullpen. So you're just kind of called upon and you got to go out and pitch to somebody. If you
Right.
stretch out to the 6th inning, yeah, even if they're even if they're in some 2-out, 2-walk trouble, let them try and get them out of that inning instead of pulling them and then having your bullpen save your ass on a nightly basis, which they
Right.
haven't done.
I mean, I agree with you. I don't think anyone. Well, I guess Pat Neshek probably to me would be the only guy that really has a role, and that's like a guy with a real funky delivery that can get outs. He doesn't throw hard. He won't really strike people out, but if you need a ground ball, he'd be the guy to get it. But yeah, I think you're right. I think with most teams, I think a good way to put it is that every one of the bullpen's a puppet, and everyone has a role to play. You have your long guys, you have your middle relievers, your setup guys, and then your closer. At least that's how it should work. But the Phillies have none of that. You can't really tell
Right.
who's coming in when and where and why.
Right.
So
I quickly want to get your opinion since, for anyone who doesn't know, Elijah is the premier baseball writer for MySportingEdge.com. You can check out his work. But let me get your opinion on this. So Matt Stairs came in, and I know we talked preseason about this in spring training. He's trying to bring a different approach. However, you look down the lineup, and everyone's hitting less than 225, other than Cesar and Aaron Altair. You got
Yeah.
Franco hitting like 204. Tommy Joseph is awful. He's been the worst Philly in 2017, in my opinion. Michael Saunders isn't even doing, what he was hitting well early in the season, but everyone's fall off. They're right around 200. Do you think
Yeah.
he's the guy going forward, or just what's going on? Because they're just not getting it done.
I think I said in the preseason when I came on, I called in that Matt Stairs would have a pretty solid effect, and I didn't know if it was going to be good or bad. And I still don't know really because it's early enough in the season where everyone can turn it around. Cameron Rupp has shown that he can turn it around, and he pretty much already has. He was hitting, I think, near 200 for a long time, and in the past 10, 11 games, he's turned around. He's got his average up to like 250, I believe. And I think they're waiting for that with, Tommy Joseph too, but you see their confidence in him wavering a little bit because Brock Stassie's all of a sudden getting a ton of starts
Yeah.
out of nowhere. And I don't mind that, but it also, has me questioning, like, you have these guys down in AAA. You have Hoskins, who's a power bat, and I mean, I think he's down there in AAA. He's hitting like 390. So I don't see why. I mean, if a move's going to be made, I'd make it sooner than later.
Is it too early to bring up the prospects?
Hoskins, no, I don't think so. He's demolishing AAA pitching. He's shown that he's quite possibly major league ready to hit, major league pitching. And he could play subpar defense, but if he comes up and he hits 25 home runs in the rest of this year, which is totally possible, I think, he might be the guy going forward. And I was talking to one of my friends the other day. I said, it kind of seems like a shame that Tommy Joseph's time in Philadelphia is limited. And he goes, what do you mean? He's like the starting first baseman. I said, well, you have, this guy, Rhys Hoskins, he's hitting 390. He's got 8 home runs. Not only that, Dylan Cousins, who's also a power bat, can play first base. So, I mean, if either one of them is coming up, well, guess what? He's gone. And Andrew Knapp, who's, shown that he can play a solid defensive first base, he's got a spot. You need a backup catcher, too.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think Tommy Joseph's days are limited. I think there are actually quite a few people on this team whose days are limited with the Phillies, and in my opinion, it's just a matter of time. before they either get shipped off or sent down or whatever.
This this is supposed to be a positive segment somehow, but
Well,
again, we are talking about the Phillies, so it is what it is. Let's get to two positive. Let's end on a good note, and let's get to the final two headlines coming from the Phillies. Let's start with Aaron Nola, who rejoined the team in Texas and is slated to start with Pittsburgh. It'll be great to get him back. My question for you though is, do you think they stick with a 5-man rotation? Because I know, man, Zach Eflin came up. Do you think they'll go 5 or 6-man rotation just to kind of help out these younger guys?
if you ask me, I think they need to get Nick Pivetta out of the pitching rotation as soon as possible. I don't think he's major league ready personally. I think more time in AAA would really help. Eflin has shown that he can be a major league starter, so I think he sticks around. More or less, the question after that is, where does Nola fit in? He's going to start. I believe they said either Saturday or Sunday. Sunday, I believe. For the Phillies in Pittsburgh. But where does he fit in? Could they go a week with a 6-man rotation? Yes, but then again, you're not really saving your bullpen at all when you do that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Last one for you, and we've had a great debate going over the last few weeks. I really like this talk. Aaron Altair has been killing it. His first 50 at bats, all he hits is doubles and home runs, and I love it. He's been great. However, let's look at the fact that he could be the next Dom Brown, and I know a lot of Phillies fans who may be listening are not going to take kind to that. They see a lot of different things in him. He's been compared to Jason Worth, but like you said, Dom Brown also had a really good month. But Aaron Altair seems to be carrying it into May and only getting stronger as the season goes on, albeit a young season.
Right. And I think I believe, I don't know if I was the one that initially told you watch Dom Brown's kind of in this kid. But, when I look at Aaron Altair, I do see a little bit of Dom Brown. I see like a really athletic, really tall, pretty strong outfielder who, can handle a bat. But the question is this season for Aaron Altair one of those half season and then fizzle out completely sort of years? Or is it, I'm going to keep getting better, I'm going to keep hitting like 320, and, will he make an all-star team? I mean, the year really for Dom Brown was 2013. He had those 27 home runs. He had 272. But I believe at the All-Star break, he was still hitting like 290, 300. And he had 18 to 20 home runs, I believe. So, I mean, really, it's a game it's a game of ups and downs. And I don't know about Aaron Altair. I will say this. He has shown me a lot. Because when I told you that I saw Dom Brown in him, he only had, 3 or 4 home runs?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden he proceeds to go on a tear and hit a 3-run home run in 3 games straight.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, he proved me wrong, and if he keeps proving me wrong, I'm ecstatic. The one thing I do worry about is, again, towards the future, does this create a logjam in the outfield? You have Nick Williams. You have Carlos Tocci, who's only 21, I believe. You have all these, very good outfielders.
Randolph
Dylan
that
Cousins.
they drafted a few years ago.
Yeah. So,
Roman Quinn. Odubel
Randolph,
Herrera.
Mickey Moniak, the number 1 overall pick from the Phillies. You got him, you have Tocci, you got Dylan Cousins, you got Roman Quinn, and you got Nick Williams. On. So that's 6 guys.
It's a good problem to have, but yeah, you're right. It's we talk about the logjam with the Sixers all the time. It's going to be the same thing with the Phillies in the outfield.
Oh, absolutely. And considering the fact now that you have, I think, 5 outfielders on the team, you got Saunders, Ty Kelly, Altair, Odubel Herrera, Howie Kendrick.
Even Stassi can play left field, I think, right?
Stassi can play. Yeah, Stassi can play the outfield. So I mean, you really don't know. Like that's 11 outfielders that are major league ready or close to being major league ready.
Yep.
So while that is a very good problem to have, especially in baseball where the roster size is so big, and if someone goes down, you kind of need an immediate replacement. I don't know how many of them can stick around for too long.
It's funny, though, because Dom Brown, all you heard about him is 5-tool player, and now you're starting to hear those mumblings about Aaron Altair. He can do it all. He can steal. He can hit. He can, drive in RBIs. He can catch the ball, all that stuff. It definitely is a good comparison. Hopefully doesn't work out like Don Brown did, who is out of baseball. So
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of sports now is looking at the like advanced sabermetric statistics or whatever. But I mean, if you look at it, Aaron Altair is on pace to get close to, if not a little higher, the offensive WAR or wins above replacement that Don Brown had in 2013. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets to that mark. And I would like to note that Altair's defense is better than Don Brown's, so I think his overall WAR will be higher as well.
all right, guys, that's going to wrap up this show. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to episode 42. Elijah, thank you for joining me. Great job out of you. Joe, thanks for calling in. If you're still watching, he might be sleeping. Who knows? Don't forget, you can always find us at mysportingedge.com and on social media for the latest articles, news, and updates. If you ever miss a show, you can tune in by subscribing on iTunes, YouTube, SoundCloud. Again, just search for Sporting Edge and you'll find us. And feel free to hit us up on the SE Radio hotline by leaving a message during the week. Or again, call in during the show. We'd love to hear from you. That number is 267-404-MYSE. And we will see you next Wednesday at 8 o'clock for the next episode.